Military transport aircraft provide the muscle to project combat power around the world. This video ordnance program looks at the United States Air Force's transport arm, the Military Airlift Command. Departing for Saudi Arabia, this massive C-5 Galaxy transporter will fly halfway around the world to complete its mission. In less than a day, its cargo of men and military materiel will be on the ground in the Persian Gulf, supporting Operation Desert Storm. Military Airlift Command, or MAC for short, is the vital link between American military bases in the United States and its far-flung bases around the world. During peacetime, MAC serves as the air transport branch of the United States Air Force, moving troops and equipment across thousands of miles. MAC has two wartime roles. If the United States Army decides to use paratroop forces in battle, as was the case in Grenada in 1982 and Panama in 1989, it is the Military Airlift Command which provides the lift into the combat zone. MAC's second role is to supply forward deployed units with critical equipment and supplies. MAC shares this transport responsibility with the U.S. Navy. Ships are much more efficient to carry large, heavy loads. The Navy will typically carry over 90% of the equipment in any prolonged military operation. Airlift's principal advantage is its speed. Transport aircraft can deliver combat units to locations around the globe in a day. Ships would take more than a week.
Normally, we would anticipate that about 95% of everything that is going to be moved to a theater of operations would go by sea lift. The things that go by air are typically the very high priority things that they have to have in a very short time. It typically takes sea lift on the order of about 30 days to begin closing. So once you get out of that first 30 days of the operation, you would hope that sea lift would be pulling the bulk of the requirements. The number of forces over there has grown so rapidly that frankly the only way to support it has been through concentrated airlift in addition to sea lift.
At the heart of Military Airlift Command are its transport aircraft. 3 different aircraft are workhorses of Military Airlift Command. The Lockheed C-130 Hercules, the Lockheed C-141 Starlifter, and the Lockheed C-5 Galaxy. The C-130 Hercules is the smallest of the 3, but the most numerous, with nearly 500 in MAC service. The Hercules can operate in the toughest of conditions, whether from normal runways or unprepared dirt strips. It is used not only by the United States Air Force, but by many other air forces around the world. In the transport role, it takes cargo from major airports and delivers it to troops in the field who may have no prepared airfield. The C-130 has seen extensive combat use to drop paratroop forces. It can carry up to 64 paratroopers during an airborne assault. The teams we see jumping here are Air Force drop zone control teams, who will control later waves of paratroop forces from the ground. In the cargo roll, the Hercules can carry about 25 tons of supplies. During a cargo drop, a small drogue chute pulls the cargo pallet out of the rear of the aircraft, and the main parachute opens later. One of the Hercules' unique combat capabilities is the delivery of heavy cargo such as tanks by LAPES, an acronym for Low Altitude Parachute Extraction System. A drogue chute at the rear of a specially reinforced pallet drags the tank out of the Hercules. The pallet absorbs the heavy impact of the landing. The mainstay of the Mack fleet is the C-141 Starlifter. The C-130 is used as a short-distance hauler, while the C-141 is a long-distance hauler. The Starlifter can fly the long missions from bases in the United States to locations in Europe and the Pacific area. It can also be used in a combat role for dropping paratroopers. The C-141 can carry 155 paratroopers during an air assault mission, or carry nearly 40 tons of cargo. The largest of the Mack airlifters is the C-5A Galaxy. For many years, the C-5 was the largest military aircraft in the world. It has a payload capacity of about 130 tons and can carry the equivalent of 6 large buses or 48 Cadillacs. The C-5 was developed specifically to carry off-size military cargo, which can include tanks, military vehicles, missile launchers, and other large payloads. Even without using the main cargo hold, there are 2 main areas aboard the C-5 for passengers. A small compartment behind the cockpit can carry 8 couriers, and an aft troop compartment at the base of the tail has space for a further 75 troops. In order to load cargo aboard, the C-5 has several unique features. Its large nose can be opened as well as its large tail doors, allowing easy access. Its landing gear can kneel, bringing the fuselage near the ground. This allows the C-5 to be loaded at unprepared airfields, since it doesn't require the specialized loading equipment needed by commercial airliners. In spite of its enormous size, the C-5 is not significantly more difficult to fly than its smaller cousin, the C-130.
My background is all in C-130 before I got here to Dover, so I'm more familiar with the small airplane, as some people would call it, or at least when you look at a C-5, it's small. But the airplane itself is really not that much more difficult to fly, just by virtue of its size. Where the C-5 does pose a problem is when you have to deal with it on the ground. It's a terribly difficult airplane to taxi, to maneuver in small spaces, and that's probably the biggest problem we have with the airplane. But as far as its performance in the air, it's absolutely superb.
The crew of the C-5 is 7. The 2 pilots and 2 flight engineers fly in the forward cabin of the aircraft. The 3 loadmasters are responsible for overseeing the loading, unloading, and safe transit of the cargo. From a technical standpoint, the C-5's closest civilian counterpart is the Boeing 747.
Well, 747s and DC-8s and DC-10s that are cargo-capable airplanes can carry a lot of cargo, and they're important to what we do. But they can only carry cargo that fits on pallets. And unfortunately, a lot of the military equipment that we have today, especially in the Army, is bigger than what can fit on a pallet. It's wider than that. So while a 747 is called a wide body, you really don't have the door capability to get that equipment in the airplane. And that's why the C-5 is really the only airplane that can carry that kind of equipment. Even the 141 is limited to pallet-sized equipment.
The only other military transporter that compares to the C-5 Galaxy is the Soviet Antonov 124 Ruslan and its enlarged version, the Antonov 225. The Antonov 225 is currently the largest aircraft in the world. It is patterned after the C-5 with a large clamshell door in the nose to permit heavy cargo to be loaded. Like the C-5, it has a massive landing gear array to support its enormous bulk. The Antonov 225 was designed primarily to carry oversized loads such as the Soviet space shuttle. Military airlift air crews take pride in their professional skills. A popular test of those skills comes every year at Pope Air Force Base in North Carolina in a demanding competition called Airlift Rodeo. Airlift Rodeo pits crews from around the world in a series of challenges to test their skills in conducting airlift operations.
This tests our ability to do what we do every day and what we would do if we had to go to war. It's the planning that goes into this is the same type of planning that we would do and we did when we went to Panama. There's many hours sitting down at a table with the air crew getting together, figuring out a route to get in, figuring out where you're supposed to be at one time, trying to coordinate with other users, other airplanes that are flying in the air. It is exactly what we do. Every day we train, every day when we compete here, and every day when we go do our job out in the real system.
Airlift Rodeo 1990 involved aircraft from no fewer than 10 countries, including teams from Britain, Israel, Germany, and France. 28 of the teams flew the C-130, 2 teams its European equivalent, the C-160 Transall, and 9 teams flew the C-141 Starlifter. Here, a British C-130 conducts a paratroop drop.
Well, there's a wealth of experience to be gained from coming over here. The terrain's slightly different. Your procedures over here are slightly different. In fact, in many ways, a lot different to ours. So there's a lot to be gained experience-wise over here for the entire crew. as far as the exercise itself goes, it's good fun and very challenging.
Airlift Rodeo includes a dozen scored contests that are totaled to determine the winner of the General Moore Trophy. The challenges include paratrooper drops, heavy load drops, and pinpoint landings.
The things that we're doing in competition, be them airdrops of heavy equipment or airdrops of personnel or of container delivery systems, plus the spot landings that we're judged on upon completion of a drop when the airplane returns to Pope. They're graded on their accuracy of where they can land the airplane, plus the what we call ERO, which is engine running onloads and offloads. Those things are part of our everyday capability. And here, what we're doing is to show how good our crews are in those various capabilities.
To give the foreign teams a fair start, pilots and crews visit Pope Air Base a few months before Airlift Rodeo each year.
Probably the most useful training we did was to come over here to Pope in April for 4 days to do some flying around the local area, to check out the terrain, look at the American maps and see what the differences are between this country and the United Kingdom. Over here it tends to be pretty flat, pretty featureless, and quite a lot of the things that are on the map aren't actually on the ground. For example, you might find a water feature that's on the map, but you just don't see it. So all these things are some things we need to get used to and to practice over here.
The U.S. teams were especially anxious to select the best crewmen for Airlift Rodeo 90, since a U.S. team has not won the Moore Trophy for several years. During the flying competitions, scoring is made not only on the accuracy of the paratroop drops, but also on the accuracy of the navigation into the drop zone.
We do about a 40-minute low-level route at 300 feet above the ground. We have to find 6 checkpoints along the way. They might be a road intersection or a bridge or something similar, and quite often it's sort of buried in the trees. It's a bit hard to see until you get right over the top of it. You fly right over the top and go into the drop, which is on a drop zone. It's a special cleared area with a marker, and the idea is to get the load on top of the marker. So during the run-in, the navigator works out what the wind is and how far forward the load will be thrown. It sort of juggles the figures to get it on the spot, but wind's a very fickle sort of thing to deal with.
The competition crews drop both cargo and paratroopers. The paratroopers come from the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division, located nearby at Fort Bragg. There's a special bond between the Military Airlift Command and the 82nd Airborne. They have shared many of their most difficult missions together, including recent operations in Panama and Grenada. During the Panama operation, of the 112 aircraft over the combat zone, 105 were Military Airlift Command aircraft. Besides the air crew in the transport aircraft, there are also Air Force teams on the ground. Near the landing area is a drop zone controlling team, which monitors the drop, communicating both with the aircraft and the main base. The controllers inform the approaching aircraft of the situation on the ground, including any wind conditions or other factors which might affect the accuracy of their paratroop drop. The control team parachutes into the landing zone with the first wave.
Well, in a real-world situation, you'd be on the ground controlling follow-on aircraft that would come in, like Panama, Grenada, for example. You'd be providing air traffic control and separation and things of that nature. Right now, we're communicating with Pope Air Force Base Command and Control. We're letting them know what's going on, scores and things like that. Or should there be any mishaps or anything like that, we could call in a rescue aircraft or whatever right away. It's quick communication. We have a basic UHF radio. When properly set up, you can use the SATCOM antenna and aim it at a satellite, which will relay your message to wherever it needs to go. You can get a long distance with that.
Besides the flying competitions, Airlift Rodeo also tests the capabilities of the ground crews. about a third of the total points judged in the competition involve the ground crew.
This rodeo does a lot of things for us. First of all, it gives us the opportunity to hone our abilities through readiness, through training, getting prepared to come here. Then the competition makes us even better. Nothing beats a little competition to hone our skills.
The winners of this year's competition were teams from the 63rd Military Airlift Wing from Norton Air Force Base in California. It was the first time a C-141 team had won the competition since its inception in 1979, and a tribute to superior aircraft handling. With the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq in August 1990, Military Airlift Command was put to the test. American leaders were worried that Iraq might extend its invasion beyond Kuwait and on into Saudi Arabia. The United States was determined this would not happen. President Bush decided to dispatch forces to the desert to make the American position clear. Time was critical. The deployment needed to be executed quickly. Sea lift would be too slow. Military airlift was the obvious choice. Beginning on the 8th of August, Military Airlift Command began flying forces into Saudi Arabia. The first phase was to fly in military airlift personnel to prepare the bases. The weather was stifling hot, nearly 130 degrees by noon, and sandstorms made flying all the more difficult. But many of the aircrew had made previous visits to Saudi bases and were well prepared for the task ahead.
Well, when we first got in, it was real hot. I've spent some time over here already this year, so I was kind of prepared for it. It was an empty ramp, an empty base. Nothing that you see here except for the building over there was around. And we just got off the airplane and started looking around at a place to set up because we knew there was going to be a lot of aircraft coming in immediately behind us.
I was literally on the first aircraft with about 35 other individuals with another aircraft immediately in tandem coming into the location here in Saudi Arabia. First day we were on the ground, 7 aircraft, and we arrived on the ground at 13:15 in the afternoon local. The actual airflow we had the next day from 7 up to 47 just astounded the heck out of all of us.
With the bases ready, Mac began flying in plane load after plane load of troops from the United States Army's 82nd Airborne Division. The 82nd Airborne Division formed the critical tripwire on the Saudi-Kuwait border, deterring the Iraqis from pushing south. The mission was successful. The Iraqis did not move against Saudi Arabia. Operation Desert Shield was a superb example of airlift in action.
Desert Shield is a textbook, classic case of a military deployment. We started out where the initial phase is the actual deploying of the MAC people that need to run the airline at all the locations where we're going to be loading and unloading cargo. The second phase of the deployment then gets into the deployment of combat forces. And then the third phase is the sustainment of those forces.
The hub of military airlift command activity in the United States for Desert Shield and Desert Storm has been Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Dover operates a wing of C-5 Galaxies, and it has been the way station for many other aircraft transiting to Saudi Arabia.
Well, we're primarily an airlift wing. We have 38 C-5 aircraft, and we comprise half of the active duty force of the C-5. And our mission is airlift. We airlift cargo, supplies, and people to anywhere in the world. We've probably tripled or quadrupled our workload, and while it comes in peaks and valleys, we've been real busy since the 7th of August. And it's kind of gone in 3 phases. Our first phase, we were carrying our own people to the onload and offload locations to facilitate the movement of various military units. And then after that, we got into the troop movement phase, where we'd go to an onload location and pick up the military unit and carry it all the way over into Southwest Asia. And then we moved into the third phase, which we're still in now, and that's where we've been carrying resupply and spare parts that have shipped directly here out of Dover.
A critical element in Mac's ability to expand to meet wartime need is its reserve component. Many of the pilots flying the C-5s from Dover are reservists who normally fly commercial airliners while in civilian life. On the equipment side, the Air Force began a program in the 1980s called Civilian Reserve Air Fleet to bolster Mac during wartime surges. The CRAF program provided small subsidies to commercial airlines to reinforce their transport aircraft, making them capable of carrying heavy military pallets. During wartime, these aircraft are leased by the United States Air Force.
CRAF is a program that's designed to augment the nation's airlift capability. They provide on the order of probably 30% of our total wartime capability, and it's a real bargain for us because we don't pay anything for them to be in the craft. We pay them when we use them. So it gives us an extraordinary amount of airlift capability without all the cost associated with maintaining a wartime capability during peacetime.
Once the C-5s and C-141s arrive in Saudi Arabia, it is the turn of the short-range C-130s to take over. The C-130s carry the supplies to forward deployed troops, landing them by parachute at more remote locations. Some of the larger forward bases have their own improvised airstrips using portions of local highways. The Hercules is one of the few transport aircraft capable of working out of such minimal facilities. In times of war, it is military airlift which provides the means to rapidly project military power around the globe. Modern warfare demands a constant stream of personnel, equipment, and spare parts to keep the war machines fighting. Military Airlift Command provides the muscle to sustain combat power.